Are you filing a marriage-based green card application? Do you know what forms you need? What supporting evidence you need? If you do not know, don't worry. That's what I'm here for. I am going to break down what forms you need, what evidence you should include, and I'm going to give you 2 additional tips to make sure your case does not get rejected. I am U.S. Immigration Attorney Lilian Chukwurah, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their family using the U.S. immigration law system. First thing we need to go over are the forms you're going to need. For a marriage-based green card application, this is specifically for your spouse if they entered with inspection or with parole, some form of admission into the U.S., and you are a U.S. citizen. These are the forms you'll fill out. The first one is an I-130. And with the I-130, you're also going to include an I-130A. It's a supplement to the I-130. Then you're going to need the I-485, which is the actual green card application. With the green card application, that I-485, you're going to need the affidavit of support, which is the I-864. And also, with the green card application, you're going to need a medical exam report. The I-130 literally tells USCIS, this is my spouse. We meet all the requirements for this person to be classified as my spouse and for a marriage to be considered bona fide, meaning real. So, with the I-130, if you file it by itself without the I-485, your spouse will be classified as the spouse of a U.S. citizen, but that is all you get is that classification. You do not actually get a green card. You cannot do other things. All right. With the green card application, the 485, you can then apply for a work permit and a travel permit. So the work permit is the form I-765 and the travel permit is the form I-131. As you can see, I did not include the I-765 or the I-131 as required forms for the marriage-based green card process because they are not required. They're add-ons to that. So because you're filing the green card application, you're able to add on the work permit application. You're able to add on the travel permit application, the advanced parole application. Now, you may be wondering, should I even travel if I get an advanced parole document? Well, watch my live from a week ago where I go over who should be traveling and what things you need to consider if you decide to travel outside of the U.S. while your case is still pending. Now that we know the forms, let's dive a little deeper into the supporting documents required for these forms. So for the I-131, remember, it's all about, is this marriage real? So we're going to start with the legal question of if the marriage is real. So are you married? You need a marriage certificate to show that. Is your marriage valid? You need to make sure that if you have any other marriage before the current one, that you include the termination of that prior marriage. So you need a divorce decree, a death certificate, something showing that that previous marriage legally ended before you married your current spouse. Then along with that is the non-legal requirement, which is the bona fide requirement. USCIS is going to want you to show that you and your spouse are in a legal relationship. You two are putting yourself out there as a married couple. So if all you include is your marriage certificate, that doesn't really tell USCIS anything about your relationship. So this is where pictures, tax return filed jointly, bank accounts, all those things you hear, this is where it comes in because USCIS is going to use that when they're determining if your marriage is real, right? Marriage being real and marriage being legal, 2 different things. Also with the I-130, you need to include 2x2, 2-inch by 2-inch picture of yourself, the petitioner, and your spouse. So you need to make sure you include that because that is a requirement for the I-130. Also a requirement for the I-130 is proof that you, the petitioner, are a U.S. citizen. So birth certificate, if you were born in the U.S., your U.S. passport, your naturalization certificate, whatever you have, you need to include that. Now let's go to the I-485. The supporting documents for that is proof that your spouse entered the U.S. with inspection or parole. You need to prove this because they can only adjust its status in the U.S. if they had that legal entry. So you want to include their I-94 if they have one, their parole approval document if they have one, right? So you want to make sure you include that. You want to include their birth certificate. This is a requirement, okay? You need to include their birth certificate. You need to also make sure that you are paying attention to the additional forms. So the I-864, that affidavit of support, requires for the petitioner to include at least their most recent tax return. So whichever the last tax return you filed, you need to make sure that you include that. Now, if you're filing your application after April 15 of the year, you are expected to include the most recent. So, for example, we are in 2026. If you file your application on April 20th, 2026, you are expected to include the tax return for 2025 as part of your application process, unless you file for an extension. Okay, this is a requirement. You need to make sure that you have enough income for your household size. If you do not have enough income for your household size, then you may need to look at getting a joint sponsor, someone else that meets the legal requirements to support your spouse, to go ahead and file an affidavit of support as well, okay? This is a huge requirement and you need to meet this in order to get over the public charge rule. I have a whole video where I break down how to calculate your household size, how to figure out what income level you need to meet. So make sure you watch that video if you have questions about the affidavit of support itself. If your spouse has ever been arrested, charged with a crime, detained, anything like that, you need to make sure you are including the certified court records showing how that case ended so that USCIS knows this is not an issue for this case, or actually this may be an issue for the case. So here's a little tip here. If your spouse that you're filing for has a criminal record, you need to make sure that you are checking in with an immigration lawyer before you file your application, because that criminal record may actually make them inadmissible, meaning they wouldn't be able to qualify for that green card. Now that we know the forms, the documents to support it, let's talk about the two things that will get your application immediately rejected by USCIS. The first one is not including the right fees in the right form. Okay, USCIS as of October 2025 no longer accepts money orders or personal checks. They only accept the credit card authorization form and the ACH authorization form. So you can still pay with your bank account. You just need to give the authorization form as part of your application, or you can pay with a debit or credit card. If you do not have a bank account or a debit or credit card, a Visa gift card with the right amount of money in it would be accepted. USCIS has said this. So you can also use that as well. In order to avoid rejection based on your filing fees, you need to make sure two things are accurate. One is the form, like I talked about. It needs to be either a credit or debit card authorization form or an ACH authorization form. Two, you need to make sure that you are including the right fees. USCIS actually has their online fee calculator that you can use, and they also have the fee schedule. So you can go on the fee schedule, find the forms that you're filing, and make sure that you're putting in the right fees. So the forms that I mentioned that require a fee are the I-130, the I-485, the I-765, and the I-131 if you include those. The second thing that will get you an immediate rejection is if you send your application to the wrong location, okay? You need to make sure that you are checking the right filing address for the forms that you're filing. You need to make sure you're looking at the correct state And if you're filing it by the post office, and if you're filing by UPS or FedEx, that you're using the right filing address, because the address for the post office to mail your application is different from the address for UPS and FedEx to mail your application. This is a huge thing, and you need to make sure that you're putting in the right address. So those are all the things you need to know about the forms to file, the supporting documents to include, and the two things that can get your application rejected. Make sure you're paying attention to those as you're preparing your marriage-based green card process. If you have heard all of that and you're like, that is a lot to keep track of, don't worry, I'm here to help. So I have now launched a new service in our law firm where we offer a packet audit, meaning if you are putting together your application, but you're not 100% confident that you have everything you need in there, and you want my eyes on your application and basically do an audit to see if there's any red flags, if there's anything you're missing, go ahead and schedule a consultation with me, and we can figure out what you need and the best way to put together that audit. I have different tiers for the different services we provide. So for the review, it's a different fee versus the next tier, which is where we actually prepare your return for you. We take all your information, we give you a checklist of the supporting documents to include, we put together your packet for you, and then you mail it into USCIS, and you follow up with your case. And basically, all you're getting from us is a completed packet. And then, of course, we also still have our full representation, which is where we prepare all your things, like everything that's required, and also represent you moving forward with USCIS. We are making sure that if there's, biometrics appointment, we're letting you know and making sure that you go to it. We're preparing you for your interview, all of those things. So those are the 3 tiers that we currently have. Please make sure if you are going through your green card process, you do not have to go through every single step on your own, but you also don't have to hire me to go through every single step with you. You can hire me to do the steps that you need the most help with. And if you want to take advantage of any of these offers, go ahead and go to my website, lilylegal.com, click on Contact Us, and schedule a date and time for us to talk about your case and how I can best assist you.